Emily sat quietly at the far end of her mother's dining table, watching Victoria smile proudly as she signed the final transfer papers. The afternoon sunlight reflected off Victoria's expensive diamond bracelet, while the rest of the family looked at her with admiration as if she were rescuing Emily from failure. There, Victoria said confidently, sliding the documents across the table. "Your little consulting business is finally under proper management." Her voice sounded sweet, but every word carried arrogance. Emily could feel it. Her mother immediately praised Victoria for being such a caring sister, while her brother Derek agreed that Emily had never been built for business anyway. They all believed Victoria's version of the story without asking a single question. To them, Emily was just the quiet, creative daughter with a struggling home office business, while Victoria was the successful finance expert with an MBA, a luxury office, and powerful connections. Every compliment aimed at Victoria felt like another knife pushed into Emily's chest, but she kept her face calm and emotionless. Victoria continued talking proudly about how she would professionalize the company, attract real investors, and finally turn the small hobby business into something important. Emily simply nodded while sipping her coffee slowly. Deep inside, she remembered every insult, every moment her family underestimated her, and every time Victoria secretly tried to destroy her reputation. Yet today, none of them noticed how strangely calm Emily was. No arguments, no tears, no resistance. That silence should have warned them something was wrong. Instead, they mistook it for weakness. Victoria leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smile and explained that she would contact all of Emily's clients the next morning to announce the management change. Emily looked directly at her sister and quietly replied, "Yes, you should definitely contact them." Something about the way she said it made Victoria uncomfortable for a split second, but she quickly ignored the feeling. The family continued praising Victoria while Emily glanced at her watch. The timing had to be perfect. Everything had been carefully prepared long before this family dinner ever happened. Then suddenly, Emily's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and calmly stood up from the table. "Excuse me," she said softly before walking into the living room to answer the call. None of them realized that the next few minutes would completely destroy the illusion Victoria had built around herself. None of them knew that this small business transfer was about to become the biggest nightmare of Victoria's life. And none of them understood that Emily had never been weak at all. She had simply been waiting patiently for the perfect moment. If you want to discover what happened when the doorbell rang and how Victoria's entire world collapsed in front of the whole family, make sure to subscribe and follow for the next part and the latest stories. Ever since they were young, Victoria had always been treated like the successful one in the family. She spoke confidently, dressed perfectly, and carried herself like someone destined for greatness. Their parents admired everything about her, especially after she entered the world of finance and earned impressive qualifications. To them, Victoria represented intelligence, stability, and success. Emily, on the other hand, was always seen differently. She was quieter, more independent, and preferred building things slowly on her own instead of showing off achievements. Even when Emily launched her consulting business, nobody in the family truly took it seriously. Her mother constantly called it that little project, while Derek joked that Emily would probably quit and become an artist someday. Every family dinner turned into another reminder that Victoria was the daughter everyone trusted, while Emily was the daughter everyone doubted. Over time, those small comments became something much heavier. Victoria started using her family's trust like a weapon. She casually criticized Emily's business decisions in front of everyone, questioned her professionalism, and constantly suggested that Emily was overwhelmed and incapable of handling real corporate work. What hurt most was how quickly their parents believed every word. They never asked Emily about her actual clients, her contracts, or the money she was really making. Instead, they accepted Victoria's opinions as facts, simply because she sounded confident. The more Victoria talked, the more Emily became invisible inside her own family. That afternoon at the dinner table felt no different. Victoria proudly explained how she planned to save Emily's struggling company and transform it into something respectable. Their mother smiled with relief, convinced Victoria was rescuing the family from embarrassment. Derek even laughed and said Emily should be grateful. Someone competent was finally taking control. Emily sat there listening to all of it in silence. But inside her mind, she replayed years of betrayal. None of them realized how insulting it was to constantly reduce her hard work into a joke. None of them noticed that Victoria never once offered help without trying to gain control. Even worse, no one questioned why Victoria seemed so obsessed with taking ownership of Emily's business in the first place. To the family, it simply looked like generosity. To Emily, it looked exactly like what it truly was, greed hiding behind a smile. Still, Emily remained calm. She let them underestimate her one more time, because she already knew something they didn't. Every insult, every accusation, and every moment of humiliation was leading Victoria closer to a disaster she could no longer escape. The family believed Victoria was the smartest person in the room. They were about to learn how dangerous it is to underestimate the quiet person sitting silently at the end of the table. And when the truth finally exploded in front of everyone, nothing inside that family would ever be the same again. If you want to see how Emily's secret plan begins to unfold and what shocking moment leaves the entire family speechless, don't forget to subscribe and follow for the next part and the newest stories. Victoria believed she had already won the moment Emily picked up the pen and signed the transfer documents without arguing. Sitting there at the dining table, Victoria could barely hide the satisfaction on her face. To her, this was proof that Emily had finally accepted defeat. Their parents seemed relieved. Derek looked amused, and the entire room carried the uncomfortable energy of people watching one sibling quietly surrender to another. But what none of them understood was that Emily had never lost control of the situation. In reality, she had been controlling every piece of it from the very beginning. For years, Emily had carefully studied Victoria's behavior. She noticed how her sister always became interested in things that looked profitable, how she manipulated conversations to make herself appear smarter, and how easily she convinced the family to trust her version of events. Emily also learned something even more dangerous. Victoria's greed always made her impatient. The moment she saw an opportunity to gain power, money, or status, she rushed toward it without thinking carefully enough. That weakness became the foundation of Emily's entire plan. Instead of fighting publicly with her sister, after the first betrayal years earlier, Emily chose patience. She built a fake business image, piece by piece, allowing Victoria and the family to believe the company was real, but struggling. She intentionally acted uncertain during family conversations, pretended to need advice, and allowed Victoria to slowly step closer and closer into the trap. Every insult Emily tolerated was calculated. Every fake moment of weakness had a purpose. Even the transfer papers sitting on that dining table were exactly what Emily wanted Victoria to create. As Victoria proudly explained how she would take over operations and improve the business, Emily quietly observed everyone around her. Her mother smiling proudly, Derek nodding in agreement, her father praising Victoria's wisdom. None of them noticed the small details that would have revealed the truth. Emily wasn't nervous. She wasn't emotional. She wasn't even angry anymore. She looked calm because she already knew how this story ended. The transfer itself was the final step Emily needed. Without Victoria willingly taking ownership, the plan would never work. That was why Emily signed without resistance. She needed Victoria to feel powerful, safe, and completely confident. And Victoria did exactly what Emily expected. She signed every document, eagerly believing she had finally taken control over her failing sister's business. What Victoria didn't realize was that every signature was pulling her deeper into a legal disaster she could no longer escape from. Emily glanced down at her watch while the family continued talking. The timing was almost perfect now. Somewhere outside that quiet suburban house, people were already on their way. People Victoria never imagined would become part of this family dinner. Emily slowly picked up her coffee again and listened as Victoria talked about contacting clients and securing future growth. Inside, Emily almost smiled. Victoria still believed she was the smartest person in the room. In only a few more minutes, that illusion would completely collapse. If you want to see the shocking phone call Emily receives next, and the terrifying moment that changes Victoria's life forever, make sure to subscribe and follow for the next part and all the newest videos. The dining room remained filled with smug laughter and quiet satisfaction as Victoria carefully organized the signed transfer documents into her expensive leather portfolio. She looked completely relaxed now, almost glowing with confidence. To everyone at the table, the difficult conversation was finally over. Victoria had taken control of Emily's failing business, the family had avoided embarrassment, and life could supposedly move forward peacefully again. But Emily knew the real story was only beginning. She sat silently for another moment while listening to Victoria confidently describe her future plans for the company. Victoria talked about restructuring operations, attracting serious investors, and contacting all of the clients personally the next morning. Every sentence made her sound more powerful, more certain, and more convinced she had just secured herself a major financial opportunity. Emily simply watched her with calm eyes. Then suddenly her phone vibrated against the table. The sound seemed small, but to Emily it felt like the final countdown had officially started. She slowly picked up the phone and glanced at the screen. Right on time. A small wave of relief passed through her chest, because every detail had unfolded exactly according to plan. "Excuse me," Emily said quietly, as she stood from the table. Victoria barely looked up while replying casually, "Probably your last business client calling to say goodbye." Derek laughed immediately, and even their mother smiled awkwardly at the joke. Emily didn't respond. She simply walked calmly into the living room and answered the call. The voice on the other end was serious and professional. "Miss Emily Chen, this is Director Roberts from the SEC's Division of Enforcement. Are you currently with the subject?" Emily looked back toward the dining room, where she could still hear Victoria bragging loudly about management strategies. "Yes," Emily replied softly. "The transfer was completed a few minutes ago." There was a short pause before Director Roberts spoke again. "And she willingly signed all ownership documents and assumed full operational control." Emily's eyes narrowed slightly as she answered completely willingly. She believed she was taking over a profitable business. Another brief silence followed before Roberts quietly said something that almost sounded amused. "In all my years investigating corporate fraud, I've never seen someone walk directly into federal liability this confidently." Emily allowed herself the faintest smile. "I thought you'd appreciate the documentation." Roberts responded immediately. "We're less than 5 minutes away. Keep everyone there if possible." Emily looked back again toward the dining room entrance. Victoria's voice was still echoing through the house, as she confidently explained how she planned to expand the company and secure future financing. She had absolutely no idea what was coming. "They're not going anywhere," Emily said calmly, before ending the call. For a brief second, Emily stood alone in the quiet living room and took a slow breath. After years of preparation, manipulation recordings, fake documents, and careful planning, the moment had finally arrived. Everything was about to change forever. When she returned to the dining room, the atmosphere immediately felt different. Victoria narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "Who was that?" she asked. Emily slowly sat back down in her chair and calmly answered with only one word: "Work." None of them realized that within minutes, strangers would walk through the front door and completely destroy the illusion Victoria had spent years building. If you want to see the terrifying moment the SEC arrives at the house, and the shocking reaction from Victoria and the entire family, make sure to subscribe and follow for the next part and all the newest videos. The moment the doorbell rang, the entire atmosphere inside the house changed. The sound itself was normal, but something about Emily's calm expression suddenly made Victoria uncomfortable. For the first time that evening, the confident smile on her face weakened slightly. "Are you expecting someone?" their mother asked, while looking around the table nervously. Emily slowly lifted her coffee cup and answered in a quiet voice. "Yes." Victoria frowned immediately. For what she asked sharply, but Emily didn't answer. Their mother walked toward the front door while everyone else remained frozen at the dining table. A strange silence filled the house. Even Derek stopped joking. A few seconds later, the sound of the door opening echoed through the hallway, followed by unfamiliar voices speaking in calm professional tones. "Good afternoon. We're looking for Victoria Chen." The moment those words reached the dining room, Victoria's entire body stiffened. Her eyes widened slightly, as confusion turned into fear. Then 4 people wearing dark suits stepped into the house carrying briefcases and official badges. The woman standing in front introduced herself immediately. "I'm Director Sarah Roberts from the Securities and Exchange Commission." The room went completely silent. Emily remained seated calmly while Victoria slowly stood up from her chair. "The SEC," she whispered weakly. "There must be some mistake." Director Roberts looked directly at her with a cold professional expression. Victoria Chen, we need you to come with us regarding an ongoing investigation involving corporate fraud, securities violations, and identity theft. Derek jumped to his feet instantly. What the hell is happening? Their mother looked horrified while their father stared at the agents in disbelief. Victoria shook her head repeatedly as panic spread across her face. No, this is insane. Emily's business is just a consulting company. Emily finally looked directly at her sister and quietly replied, no, it isn't. The entire room turned toward Emily at once. Victoria's breathing became uneven. What are you talking about? She demanded. Emily slowly placed her coffee cup onto the table before speaking with terrifying calmness. The company you just took ownership of isn't a real consulting business. It's a shell corporation connected to a federal fraud investigation. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. Their mother looked like she might collapse. Derek stared at Emily as if he no longer recognized her. Victoria's face lost all color. You lied to me, she whispered. Emily's expression never changed. No, I gave you exactly what you spent years trying to take from me. Director Roberts stepped forward and opened her briefcase. Victoria Chen, by signing those transfer documents and assuming operational control, you accepted legal responsibility for multiple fraudulent financial activities connected to this entity. Victoria suddenly exploded in anger. She tricked me. This is entrapment. Roberts calmly shook her head. Entrapment only applies when law enforcement pressures someone into committing a crime they otherwise would not commit. Your sister is a private citizen. You willingly pursued ownership of this company on your own. Victoria looked desperately around the room, searching for support, but nobody knew what to say anymore. The same family who spent the entire evening praising her now sat frozen in absolute shock. Emily simply watched silently, while years of manipulation and arrogance finally collapsed in front of everyone. What do you think about Emily's plan? Was this justice or revenge? And do you believe Victoria deserved what happened to her? Leave your opinion in the comments below. Victoria stood frozen in the middle of the dining room while the SEC agents calmly spread documents across the table. Her confident expression had completely disappeared, now replaced by fear and disbelief. The same woman who had proudly announced she was saving Emily's business only minutes earlier suddenly looked like she could barely breathe. Their mother kept shaking her head in confusion, while Derek stared at Emily in complete shock. Nobody understood how a simple family business transfer had turned into a federal investigation. Then Emily finally revealed the truth that changed everything. She slowly stood from her chair and looked directly at Victoria before speaking in a calm voice that somehow felt colder than anger. The company was never real, she said quietly. It was a shell corporation designed to expose fraud. The room went silent again. Victoria blinked repeatedly as if her mind refused to process the words. What are you talking about? She whispered. Emily took a slow breath before explaining everything. Years earlier, after Victoria first attempted to steal one of Emily's real clients, Emily realized something terrifying about her own sister. Victoria wasn't simply competitive. She was willing to manipulate, lie, and steal if it gave her financial advantage. At first, Emily tried handling the situation privately, but nobody believed her. Their family dismissed her concerns and defended Victoria immediately. That was the moment Emily decided she would never again rely on trust alone. She would rely on evidence. So, over the following years, Emily secretly built an entirely fake business structure. The company appeared successful on paper, with convincing financial records, fake revenue streams, and fabricated growth projections. To outsiders, it looked like a struggling consulting firm with hidden potential. But behind the scenes, every number inside the company was intentionally fraudulent. Emily never used the company for real business activity. Instead, she carefully maintained it as bait, a trap, waiting for someone greedy enough to try taking control of it. And Emily already knew exactly who would eventually fall for it. Victoria shook violently as the truth sank in. You built a fake company just for me, she asked in horror. Emily looked at her without emotion. No, I built a fake company to reveal who you truly are. Director Roberts stepped forward and calmly added, Your sister created a legal shell entity The crime occurred when you knowingly attempted to assume ownership and use its false financial records for personal financial gain. Victoria's breathing became heavier. I didn't know the records were fake, she shouted desperately. But Emily immediately responded, "That's not true. You reviewed the documents yourself. You studied the revenue reports, the projected growth numbers, and the client portfolios before forcing me to transfer ownership." Derek slowly turned toward Victoria with a stunned expression. "You were planning to use the company financially," Victoria didn't answer. Her silence became the loudest confession in the room. Emily continued speaking calmly, while years of hidden pain finally surfaced in her voice. "You weren't trying to help me. You wanted control because you thought the company could make you richer and more successful." Their mother looked like she was about to cry. "Victoria, tell me this isn't true." But Victoria couldn't even look at her anymore. The illusion of the perfect, successful daughter was collapsing piece by piece, right in front of the entire family. Emily had spent years pretending to be weak, failing, and insecure, while secretly preparing every detail of this moment. And now there was no escape left. Do you think Emily went too far by creating this trap? Or do you believe Victoria deserved everything that happened? Share your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to continue following the next shocking parts and the newest stories. As the SEC agents continued organizing documents across the dining table, Emily finally revealed the part of the story her family had never heard before. Her voice stayed calm, but every word carried years of pain that had been buried in silence. "This didn't start tonight," she said quietly, while looking directly at Victoria. "It started years ago when you first tried to steal from me." The entire room froze again. Their mother immediately shook her head. "No. Victoria would never do that." But Emily didn't stop speaking this time. For years, she had stayed quiet while everyone dismissed her concerns, ignored her warnings, and treated her like she was paranoid. Now, with SEC agents standing inside the house, nobody could interrupt her anymore. Emily explained that years earlier she had landed one of the biggest clients of her career. The contract was valuable, stable, and important for expanding her real consulting business. At first, she had proudly shared the news with her family, believing they would finally respect her success. Instead, Victoria became strangely interested in the client almost immediately. She asked endless questions about payment structures, company details, and account access. Emily thought nothing of it at first because she trusted her own sister. But only weeks later, the client contacted Emily directly with alarming news. Victoria had secretly reached out to them pretending to be Emily's business partner. She claimed Emily was inexperienced and incapable of handling such a large account properly. Then she attempted to redirect future payments into a different financial account, under the excuse of updating corporate banking systems. The client immediately became suspicious, because Victoria couldn't answer important questions about the project itself. Thankfully, instead of transferring the money, they contacted Emily to verify everything. The moment Emily learned what happened, she confronted Victoria privately. But instead of apologizing, Victoria denied everything. She accused Emily of overreacting, misunderstanding the situation, and trying to create drama. When Emily turned to the family for support, things became even worse. Their parents immediately defended Victoria and claimed Emily was probably exaggerating. Derek laughed and suggested Emily was simply jealous of Victoria's success in finance. Nobody asked to see proof. Nobody questioned why Victoria contacted the client behind Emily's back. They simply trusted the more confident sister. Emily slowly looked around the room while remembering that betrayal. "That was the moment I realized none of you would ever believe me without evidence," she said quietly. Their mother's eyes filled with tears. Derek looked down at the floor, unable to meet Emily's eyes anymore. Victoria stood motionless, her face pale, as every hidden truth finally surfaced. Emily explained that after the family ignored the first theft attempt, she stopped relying on trust completely. She began documenting everything, every suspicious conversation, every manipulation tactic, every moment Victoria tried to undermine her professionally. "I gave you years to stop," Emily said softly while staring at Victoria. "Years to admit what you did and change. But instead, you got greedier." Victoria finally snapped back in anger. "You're twisting everything. I was trying to help you." Emily's expression never changed. "No, You were trying to take something that wasn't yours. Again. The room became silent once more because deep down, everyone finally realized Emily had been telling the truth all along. The problem was that nobody cared enough to listen until it became a federal case. What do you think about the family refusing to believe Emily the first time? And if you were in her position, would you have forgiven Victoria or done the same thing Emily did? Leave your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next shocking part and the newest stories. Victoria's hands were trembling now as the SEC agents continued reviewing the documents spread across the dining table. The confident businesswoman image she had carefully maintained for years was collapsing faster with every passing second. Emily remained calm, but the room could feel something different in her voice now. This was no longer just anger or revenge. It was years of betrayal, finally being exposed, piece by piece. Emily slowly reached into her bag and pulled out her phone before placing it gently on the table. "You all kept asking how I knew Victoria would try this again," she said quietly. "The answer is simple, because I documented everything." Victoria's face tightened immediately. "What does that mean?" she asked nervously. Emily unlocked the phone and opened a folder filled with audio recordings, screenshots, emails, and saved messages. For years, Emily continued, "I recorded every conversation where Victoria pressured me to hand over control of my business." Derek looked stunned. "You recorded family conversations?" Emily nodded calmly. "I recorded conversations I was legally part of. Every time Victoria called me incompetent. Every time she convinced all of you that I couldn't run my own company. Every time she explained why the business would be safer under her control." Their mother covered her mouth in shock, while Victoria's breathing became heavier. Emily pressed play on one of the recordings. Suddenly, Victoria's voice filled the room. "Emily doesn't understand finance. She's going to destroy the company eventually. The smartest thing she can do is transfer ownership to me before everything collapses." Another recording followed. "If you really cared about your future, you'd let me manage the accounts and secure business loans properly." Then another. "You don't have the experience to handle high-level clients." "I do." Each sentence felt like another crack spreading through the family's illusion. Victoria looked horrified, listening to her own words echo through the dining room. Emily then pulled out printed documents from another folder. "And this," she said while sliding papers toward the SEC agents, "is proof Victoria was already preparing loan applications using the fake company's financial records." Derek grabbed one document and stared at it in disbelief. "These are bank applications." Emily nodded. She planned to use the company's false revenue reports to secure financing and investment capital after taking ownership. Director Roberts calmly added, "Which elevates this from simple corporate fraud into attempted bank fraud as well." Victoria instantly panicked. "No, I was just exploring options. I hadn't submitted anything yet." But one of the agents quietly corrected her. "Actually, Miss Chen, preliminary applications were already filed electronically yesterday evening." The color drained from Victoria's face completely. Emily watched silently for a moment before finally speaking again. "You spent years convincing everyone that I was weak, incapable, and failing. But the truth is, I was documenting everything while you were exposing yourself." Their father slowly sat down, looking completely defeated. Their mother began crying softly. Even Derek could no longer defend Victoria now. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of manipulation, greed, and deception were suddenly sitting in plain sight across the family dining table. Victoria looked around desperately, but there was nowhere left to run. Her own words, actions, and signatures had become the evidence destroying her life. Emily quietly leaned back into her chair and looked at her sister one last time. "You thought nobody would ever question you because the family always believed you first," she said softly. "That was your biggest mistake. Do you think Emily was right to secretly record everything for years? Or do you believe she went too far? And if your own family refused to believe you, what would you have done differently? Leave your thoughts in the comments below." Victoria's panic finally became impossible to hide as Agent Williams stepped closer and informed her that she would need to accompany the SEC team immediately for formal questioning. Just minutes earlier, she had been sitting proudly at the dining table, acting like the smartest and most successful person in the room. Now her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her purse. "You can't do this, Victoria. whispered desperately while looking around at her family. This is all a misunderstanding, but nobody moved to protect her anymore. The evidence sitting across the table was overwhelming. The transfer papers, the recordings, the loan applications, the false financial records. Every piece connected directly back to her. Emily remained silent while Victoria's entire world slowly collapsed around her. Director Roberts calmly explained that Victoria was now under investigation for multiple federal offenses, including corporate fraud, securities violations, identity theft, and attempted bank fraud. Each charge sounded heavier than the last. Their mother burst into tears while their father stared blankly at the floor in complete disbelief. Derek looked physically sick, unable to process how the sister he had defended for years was now facing serious federal crimes. Victoria suddenly pointed at Emily with trembling rage. She planned all of this. She trapped me. Emily's expression stayed cold and controlled. No, she replied softly. I gave you opportunities to stop. You chose greed every single time. Victoria shook her head violently. You wanted revenge. Because the family trusted me. More than you. Emily slowly stood up from her chair. I wanted proof. Because the first time you tried to steal from me, nobody cared enough to believe me. The silence that followed felt suffocating. For the first time all evening, nobody defended Victoria. Not even their mother. The illusion had shattered completely. Director Roberts then informed Victoria that the SEC already possessed enough documentation to move forward with criminal charges. If convicted, the consequences would be devastating. Her career in finance would be over permanently. Her professional licenses would likely be revoked. Prison time was now a real possibility. Victoria's breathing became uneven as reality finally crashed into her. No, she whispered repeatedly while tears filled her eyes. This can't be happening. One of the agents stepped forward to guide her toward the front door, but Victoria suddenly turned back toward her family one final time. She looked terrified, now stripped of all arrogance and confidence. Mom, Dad, say something, she begged weakly. Their mother cried harder but couldn't speak. Their father looked broken, unable to even meet her eyes. Derek opened his mouth as if trying to defend her again, but no words came out. There was nothing left to say. Victoria had destroyed herself with her own actions. As the agents escorted her through the hallway, Emily quietly watched from the dining room. There was no smile on her face, no celebration, just exhaustion after years of waiting for this moment. Victoria stopped near the front door and slowly turned around one last time. Her eyes locked onto Emily with a mixture of hatred, betrayal, and disbelief. You ruined my life, she whispered. Emily stared back at her calmly, before giving one final response. No. You ruined your own life the moment you decided stealing from family was acceptable. Seconds later, the front door closed behind the SEC agents, and the sound echoed through the silent house like the ending of something far bigger than a family argument. Nothing inside that family would ever be the same again. After the front door closed behind Victoria and the SEC agents, the entire house fell into a suffocating silence. Nobody at the dining table seemed capable of moving or even speaking. The family that had spent years praising Victoria and doubting Emily now looked completely shattered. Their mother sat trembling in her chair, with tears running down her face, while their father stared blankly at the table, as though the world around him no longer made sense. Derek paced nervously across the room, repeatedly running his hands through his hair, as if trying to wake himself from a nightmare. But Emily remained standing quietly near the dining room window, calm and emotionless. Finally, their mother broke the silence. How could you do this to your own sister? She cried. She's family. Emily slowly turned toward her mother, and for the first time that evening, the pain hidden deep inside her eyes became impossible to ignore. And I'm family too, she answered softly. The room went silent again. Their father looked up weakly. Emily, this went too far. You trapped her. Emily shook her head immediately. No, I documented her. There's a difference. Derek suddenly stopped pacing and turned toward Emily with anger rising in his voice. You spent years planning this. Years pretending to fail just so Victoria would walk into your trap. That's not normal. Emily looked directly at him without fear. What wasn't normal was everyone ignoring what she did the first time. What wasn't normal was all of you constantly treating me like I was incompetent while she manipulated everyone around her. Their mother wiped tears from her face. We were trying to help you. Emily gave a bitter smile. No. You were helping her control me. The words hit harder than anyone expected. Their father slowly lowered his head because deep down he knew she was right. Every family dinner, every sarcastic comment, every moment they sided with Victoria without asking questions. They had spent years creating the perfect environment for Victoria's manipulation to grow stronger. Emily walked slowly back toward the table and looked at the empty chair where Victoria had been sitting only minutes earlier. "Do you know what hurt the most?" she asked quietly. "It wasn't what Victoria did. It was realizing none of you trusted me enough to even listen." Derek looked ashamed now, but frustration still remained in his voice. "She's still our sister. She could go to prison because of this." Emily's expression hardened immediately. "No, she could go to prison because she committed crimes." The sentence cut through the room like a knife. Their mother began crying again, while Emily continued speaking calmly. "I gave Victoria years to stop. Years to admit what she did. Years to change. Instead, she became more arrogant because she believed nobody would ever hold her accountable." Their father whispered quietly, "You could have handled this privately." Emily shook her head once more. "I tried that before. Nobody believed me. Private conversations only protected her. Evidence is the only reason any of you finally see the truth now." Nobody could argue with that anymore. The recordings, financial records, and loan documents had destroyed every excuse the family once used to defend Victoria. Emily looked around the room one last time before grabbing her bag. "You all think I destroyed this family tonight," she said softly. "But the truth is, this family started breaking apart the moment honesty stopped mattering." Then she walked toward the front door while the silence behind her grew even heavier. For the first time in years, Emily no longer looked like the weak daughter everyone underestimated. She looked like someone who had finally stopped allowing herself to be treated as a victim. Do you think Emily protected herself the right way? Or do you believe she should have forgiven Victoria instead? And if your own family refused to believe you for years, how would you react? Leave your opinion in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to continue following the next emotional part and all the newest stories. The cold night air hit Emily's face the moment she stepped outside the house. But for the first time in years, she finally felt like she could breathe again. Behind her, the family home remained silent and broken, filled with shock, regret, and questions nobody was ready to answer. Emily walked slowly toward her car while gripping her bag tightly, her thoughts racing through everything that had just happened. Victoria was now in federal custody. Her parents were devastated. Derek no longer knew who to blame. And yet, despite all the chaos, Emily didn't feel triumph the way everyone probably expected her to. What she felt was exhaustion. Years of pretending to be weak. Years of allowing herself to be underestimated. Years of carrying the pain of betrayal while silently collecting evidence because nobody would listen to her without proof. As she sat inside her car, her phone suddenly vibrated again. A new message appeared from Director Roberts. "Excellent work today, Miss Chen. The evidence package is one of the strongest fraud documentation cases we've ever received." Emily stared at the message quietly for a few seconds before locking her phone again. The compliment didn't make her smile. Nothing about tonight felt like victory anymore. It felt like the painful ending of something she once desperately wanted to save her family. She leaned back against the seat and remembered the years she spent trying to earn her family's respect honestly. She remembered the excitement she once felt when building her real consulting company from nothing. She remembered how proud she was landing her first major client before Victoria tried to steal it. And more than anything, she remembered how deeply it hurt when her own family chose convenience over truth. That pain had changed her completely. Instead of becoming emotional and reckless, Emily became patient, strategic, and impossible to manipulate. She turned herself into someone who relied on facts instead of trust. That was the real reason Victoria lost. Not because Emily was cruel, but because Victoria never believed Emily was capable of fighting back intelligently. A few moments later, another call appeared on her phone. This time it was her mother. Emily hesitated before answering. All she could hear at first was quiet crying. Then her mother finally spoke in a broken voice. "I should have listened to you." Emily closed her eyes slowly, but didn't respond immediately. Her mother continued through tears, admitting that the family had spent years judging Emily unfairly, simply because Victoria looked more successful on the surface. They trusted confidence instead of honesty, titles instead of character, appearances instead of truth. Emily listened quietly, before finally saying something simple but painful. "I never needed everyone to choose me over Victoria. I just needed someone to care enough to ask if I was telling the truth." Those words left her mother completely silent. After ending the call, Emily looked out across the city lights and realized something important. Justice sometimes comes with loneliness. Doing the right thing does not always feel good, and protecting yourself from people you love can still break your heart. But allowing betrayal to continue unchecked destroys something even bigger, your self-worth. Emily started the car engine, slowly knowing tomorrow would bring courtrooms, investigations, public scandal, and probably the permanent destruction of her relationship with Victoria. But for the first time in years, she no longer felt powerless. She had protected herself. She had exposed the truth, and she had proven that silence should never be mistaken for weakness. The biggest lesson from Emily's story is that trust should never blind us to manipulation, even when it comes from family. Real love does not control, steal, or humiliate. Real support listens before judging. And sometimes the quietest person in the room is carrying the deepest truth. What lesson did you take away from this story? Do you believe Emily made the right choice in the end? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to continue following more emotional stories and the newest videos coming next.